This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the all-in-one website building platform to bring your business to life and succeed online, all in one place and all on your terms. There's a phrase you'll occasionally encounter within Western Buddhism that says something along the lines of, Zen Buddhism is for poets, and Tibetan Buddhism is for artists. Although this was just an observation from an academic view of Buddhism, coined by the American spiritual book author Robert Wright, there is a certain air of truth to it, particularly when looking at the vast and vibrant diversity of religious artwork that can be found within Tibetan Buddhism. Some of these paintings, mounted on these elaborate textile scrolls, known as thangkas, are an integral decoration of temples and monasteries that practice a certain tradition of Buddhism, or in another context, a certain path towards liberation, known as Vajrayana Buddhism. Each one has profound spiritual significance and importance. Each one has an element of mystery and awe, even to those outside of a Buddhist faith. I know it's a bit of a jump outside of my normal routine on this channel, but since a lot of you seem to enjoy my occasional videos on world art, like my video on masks from around the world for example, I thought this could be an interesting topic to explore together. There's plenty of fascinating symbolism to be discovered within the imagery of each of these mesmerizing and unique artworks, and hopefully I can shed a bit of light on what some of these thangkas mean and what they represent. This will also be a video blended with some secular perspectives and also some more traditional, or I guess, spiritual takes. This isn't a video made with the intention to preach anything, it's just as someone who has adored learning about Eastern philosophy and religion for a long time, I found in the end it's been beneficial and sort of necessary to tackle this subject with both approaches in order to get a fuller understanding of the artwork we'll be exploring together. So I just thought I'd mention that as a little heads up. Please be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell to keep up to speed with more deep dives into the art world. And without further ado, welcome to another video, my friends. I invite you on a spiritual journey through the mysterious world of thangka art. Buddhism is considered to be one of the world's oldest religions, though at the same time, many around the globe would not even consider Buddhism being a religion at all. Some would consider it to be just a philosophy, or a science of the mind, or even the world's earliest forms of modern-day psychology. Regardless of what it may be to certain people, let's take a very brief look at how Buddhism started. Contrary to the popular belief that Buddhism originated from Tibet, and understandably so given how well known the Dalai Lama is and how recognizable their religious imagery is, the first teachings of a Buddha, known in Buddhist terms as the Dharma, arose 2,600 years ago in the northeastern region located roughly between India and Nepal, within an ancient kingdom known as the Shakya clan, which is why sometimes the Buddha is known as Shakyamuni, meaning sage of the Shakyas. He was not always a sage, however. In fact, in the beginning, he was a royal prince of a Shakya kingdom called Siddhartha Gautama, who at the age of roughly 35, after renouncing his kingdom to pursue an arduous spiritual path to end all suffering of old age, sickness, and death, he achieved liberation from all suffering, which again in Buddhist terms is known as nirvana, whilst meditating under the Bodhi tree. The name Buddha comes from the ancient Sanskrit word of Bud, meaning awake or awakened. Thus he became the historical Buddha of this world, revered for teaching monks, nuns, and lay followers, known as the Sangha, for many decades right up until his death at the age of 85, when he passed into nirvana once again for the last time. All negative karma cleansed, and no more existence of life, death, and rebirth. But why is Siddhartha known as a historical Buddha and not just the Buddha? Well, this is where it gets a little complex. You see, worldwide, there are three main branches of Buddhism, or vehicles as some practitioners call them, as in 3 different means or methods to reach a specific spiritual goal. The oldest branch is known as Theravada, literally meaning the way of the elders, long practiced in regions such as Sri Lanka, Thailand, Cambodia, and Vietnam. Theravada, to put it very simply, focuses mainly on self-liberation. However, the next branch, known as Mahayana, meaning the Great Vehicle, later followed. Practiced in many regions of Asia such as China, Tibet, Korea, and Japan. The Great Vehicle, as the name suggests, focuses on the belief of not only liberating oneself, but all other sentient beings along with them, over countless, millions, and possibly billions of eons until it's achieved. Which finally leads us to the branch we're going to be focusing on for the sake of today's video topic, called Vajrayana, meaning the Diamond Vehicle, or sometimes the Thunderbolt Vehicle, practiced in regions such as Tibet, Nepal, and Bhutan. Although some scholars believe Vajrayana is simply an offshoot of Mahayana, it is sometimes referred to as the Thunderbolt Vehicle, because unlike Mahayana, that is said to take many eons of death and rebirth, Vajrayana, on the other hand, promises liberation to be quick, like lightning, and as powerful as thunder, through various ceremonial, yoga, and tantric practices. The fact is, there are actually over 84,000 different scriptures on Buddhist paths and a whole plethora of different subdivisions of Buddhism that exist all around the world, such as Zen, Pure Land, Chan, Nichiren, etc. So really, if I was to go in depth about each of these different belief systems, the video could not only stray off topic, but also end up being well over 24 hours long. What each of these 3 main branches share in common though, is not just that they all originate from ancient India, but that the ancient prince, Siddhartha Gautama, was not the only Buddha to have ever existed, nor would he be the last. In fact, Buddhists of all 3 branches, though predominantly within Mahayana and Vajrayana, believe that we may be existing within a multiverse of Buddhas, each with their own distinctive powers and benefits to help guide beings on the path to Nirvana. And many of these Buddhas appear in countless examples of Thanga art, as well as other spiritual beings and deities. What makes Tibetan Buddhist or Vajrayana Buddhist art so distinctive, however, is how and where it originated from. Again, contrary to popular belief, Tibet was one of the last regions in Asia to bring Buddhism from India into their culture. For example, whilst China had established Buddhism by the 1st century CE, Buddhism wasn't established in Tibet until roughly the 7th century CE. But Tibet was already a very spiritual land. For many generations, the people of Tibet commonly engaged in a kind of folk religion of shamanistic spirit and deity worship, known as Bun. By the time Buddhist masters had travelled from medieval India to Tibet, they were met with some resistance at first, until the legendary Indian Vajrayana guru and one of the founding masters of Tibetan Buddhism, who himself is considered to be another Buddha of this world, named Padmasambhava, or Guru Rinpoche in Tibetan, decided not to reject Bun entirely, but instead incorporate it into the Buddhist teachings as it began to take root across the land. Thus, this unique take on Vajrayana Buddhism would later become the Tibetan Buddhism we know today, which would over time leak into neighbouring countries such as Nepal and Bhutan. This is why many scholars believe the reason why all of these interpretations of Buddhist icons within Himalayan cultures look so unique. It's more than likely that a deity or revered teacher displayed in one of these thangkas is actually modelled off of a spirit being that once belonged to the ancient religion of Bun. The fact that these thangkas were painted on cloth or silk made them incredibly practical for teachings as well, as they could easily be taken down from the temple walls, rolled up and carried to nearby villages for others to see and to add a visual component to the teachings. The creation of a thangka is often very complex and a time-consuming process that requires a great deal of skill and patience. But in addition, it's also considered to be an incredibly sacred and honorific practice within Himalayan culture. The first step in creating a thangka is to prepare the canvas. This is done by stretching a piece of cotton or silk over a wooden frame. The canvas is then coated with a mixture of chalk, glue, and pigment. This mixture helps to smooth out the surface of a canvas and make it more receptive to paint. Once the canvas is prepared, the artist begins to sketch the outline of a thanga. This is a very important step as it will determine the composition of a painting. The artist uses a fine brush to draw the outlines of the main figures, objects, and landscapes. After the sketch is complete, the artist begins to apply color. This is done with a variety of brushes, each with a different size and shape. The artist uses different techniques to apply the paint, including layering, blending, and stippling, and the colors used in thangas are typically very vibrant, with surprisingly long-lasting results. Once the painting is complete, the artist may add gilding to it. This is done by applying a layer of gold leaf to the painting. The gold leaf is applied to areas of a painting that are considered to be particularly important, such as the Buddha's body or the halos of the saints. The final step in creating a thanga is to add the finishing touches. This may include adding embroidery, brocade, or other decorative elements. The thanga is then carefully mounted on a scroll and is ready to be displayed. But in terms of the imagery itself, what does some of it mean exactly? Well, let's take a look at our first example. One recurring theme you'll find in thanga art is interpretations of Buddhist cosmology and the nature of the mind. This can be found in many different symmetric illustrations known as mandalas, which often symbolize unity and harmony, with this respective deity residing in the center to help assist practitioners with their meditation and guide them to obtain certain realizations. But there is another fascinating type of thanga that exists among these many maps of the universe. In fact, it is one of the most common thangas you'll ever likely come across in a Tibetan Buddhist temple, as well as one of the most important images within Buddhism as a whole. This is known as Vajrayana, the Wheel of Samsara. As you can see, there is quite a lot to tackle here, so I'll start with probably the first question you may have, which is what exactly is samsara? Quite simply, samsara is the name of this very world, this very existence that we're living in now. When the Buddha achieved enlightenment while sitting under the Bodhi tree, one of the first realizations he had was that life for all beings is much like a spinning wheel, an existence of being born, aging, dying, then repeating the process again and again. A spiritual process shared by followers of Hinduism known as rebirth or reincarnation. In stark contrast to the Hindu concept of reincarnation, however, who believe that it's an unchanging soul known as an Atman moving from body to body, Buddhists believe that it is the consciousness alone that is reborn, a blank slate at birth that changes constantly by the time of death, entirely dependent on causes and conditions that shape it. This will be made slightly clearer on what that means exactly as we explore this artwork. Each of these 6 segments of the Wheel of Life represents 6 different realms of existence. But first, let's take a look at what lies in the middle of this wheel. Typically, each thanga of Vajrayana will have the imagery of a pig, a bird, sometimes a rooster, pigeon, or pheasant, depending on the artist, and a snake chasing each other in a circle. This is generally believed to be a representation of the 3 poisons that Buddhists believe motorize this wheel of life, which are ignorance or delusion, desire or attachment, and anger or aversion, each considered to be root causes of suffering in this world. However, some scholars and spiritual teachers will claim that the bird and snake are portrayed as emerging from the mouth of the pig, thus signifying the principal cause of desire and anger is ignorance itself. Surrounding them is the Wheel of Karma, though don't get this confused with the pop cultural reference of a word. At least within Buddhism, karma is not seen just as a universal payback or anything along those lines. Karma is simply seen as cause and effect, a simple law of the universe that any action has a result, whether good or bad, which is why positive karma, Wholesome results from wholesome actions is portrayed in white light with beings moving upwards, whilst negative karma, bad results from bad actions, is portrayed in black darkness with beings heading downwards. This then leads us to the 6 main segments of a wheel of life, known as the 6 realms of existence. The first realm in the top right is the one we know well, the human realm. Then in the top center is the God realm. Then on the top left is the realm of the demigods, or asuras as they're called in Sanskrit. The bottom left segment represents the animal realm. Then in the bottom center is the hell realm. Then finally on the bottom right is the realm of spirits, or pretas in Sanskrit, literally meaning hungry ghosts when translated to English. Thus, from a Buddhist point of view, the top 3 segments are considered the highest states of existence, whilst the bottom 3 are considered the lowest, which also adds another layer of perspective to the karma wheel that shows good karma leading beings to the higher realms of existence, and bad karma leading beings southwards towards the lower realms. Though as amazing as the idea sounds of being a god when compared to obviously how awful it would be to be reborn in a hell, each of these states of existence, even the heavenly god realm, is included in the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. Therefore, again from a Buddhist perspective, each of these realms is subject to suffering and non-lasting happiness in one way or another. The only way to true lasting happiness is to break out of this circle entirely, to put a stop to cyclic existence, and subsequently be free entirely from the 3 poisons that turn this wheel of life. But according to some spiritual teachers, such as Shantideva, it's also important to recognize each of these stages of existence as not just locations in the universe or some kind of map of the universe, but more practically as a map of the mind. For example, we often go through these different stages of life on a day-to-day basis. One time you might feel as free or as powerful as a god, or totally blissful, as if you're in a heaven somewhere, only to eventually slip out of that state of mind through different causes and conditions, to feel more like a lowly ghost, craving for worldly satisfaction but unable to quench it, or like a mindless animal giving into impulses, or at our very lowest, going through some kind of hell, experiencing all kinds of unspeakable suffering. This, in essence, is the true meaning of a wheel of life, the different states of mind that each of us experience when living our day-to-day lives. It clearly does not reject the existence of gods or hell beings, but it suggests that even gods are subject to the suffering of birth, death, and rebirth, and how hell realms, according to Buddhism, are only temporary states and are only a result of bad or unwholesome karma rather than sin or because of some cosmic justice system. On the outer circle are 12 more different segments, which again all have different interpretations depending on the artist, but generally this outer circle corresponds to what are called the 12 links of dependent origination. In other words, these are the 12 causations Buddhists believe continuously affect our karma and future lives. It's an illustration of how the Buddha taught that the world and its inhabitants are very much dependent on a systematic process, as explained through these 12 concepts. For example, in this version, we can see at 1 o'clock the image of a blind man that represents ignorance. There is quite a lot to explain for each of these 12 segments, so to keep things relatively straightforward, I will be directly quoting a Tibetan Buddhist monk and spiritual guide within the Gelugpa tradition named Geshe Tenzin Namdak from his writings, to explain from his point of view what exactly each of these 12 links mean. Bear in mind that each spiritual teacher will have their own interpretation, though generally speaking, each link means the same thing, but just worded or illustrated differently. Quote, "It is an ignorant consciousness which is obscured with respect to reality. Ignorance apprehends a concrete, inherent self, and causes afflictions to arise. As it is weak in not having a foundation of valid cognition, the blind person hobbles with a cane." End quote. In the following section, we are presented this time with what appears to be a potter basically making pots out of clay, which is best described as a representation of compositional activity, or karma. Quote, "Action brings forth its consequences. Once the potter spins the wheel, it keeps turning as long as its momentum holds up without further striving. Likewise, an action created by someone gives rise to a potential, which produces its effect without further exertion. Plus, there are various pots in size and shape. Karma also has various types: virtuous, non-virtuous, neutral, heavy, and light." End quote. Next up, we can see a monkey swinging from tree to tree, or in other versions gathering fruit, representing the link of consciousness. Quote, "A monkey is an active animal jumping from one tree to the next, symbolizing a similar quality of consciousness, which jumps to different lifetimes. When a particular karma or activity created during the first and second link comes to an end, it leaves a potential or karmic imprint in the stream of consciousness." End quote. In the next link, we see people riding on a boat that represents name and form. Quote, "The boat symbolizes form, our physical body, and the people in the boat symbolize name, or the mental aggregates, the different types of mind. The boat, our body, is the basis for the 6 types of consciousness in this life, and the vessel for happiness and suffering." End quote. The next one is a rather simple illustration of an empty house, which in some versions is illustrated as having 6 windows to represent the 6 types of consciousness that Geshe Namdak just mentioned, which is that of sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, and mind. As he continues to explain, this house refers to the time of the development in the womb, when the organs are developing but not yet functioning. Next up, we have the link of contact, represented as 2 people who are either kissing, embracing, or about to share a moment of intimacy. This denotes the meaning of an object, a sense power, and consciousness. Next is a fairly brutal sight of a person whose eye has been pierced by something, normally an arrow or another type of weapon, which represents the link of feeling. Quote, "The eye, being a sensitive organ, generates a lot of feelings, especially when touched with a sharp object. It also indicates a strong drive behind feeling to act when we have something in our eye." End quote. Then we're presented with the link of craving, normally represented with a person drinking beer or being offered a drink by someone. As Geshe Namdak explains, quote, "This is like a person who keeps drinking without finding satisfaction. Craving is a type of attachment. It initially nourishes a potential which was planted in consciousness during link number 3. End quote. We're then shown the image of a man, or sometimes a monkey in other versions, who appears to be picking fruit, which this time represents the link of grasping. Quote, "Grasping is a stronger type of attachment, an intensification of craving, and activates a potential which was planted in consciousness during link number 3. Like grasping at an object which one desires, a monkey's mind becomes excited and agitated when finding food." End quote. Next, we come face to face with the link of potential existence, or becoming. In a lot of versions, this is portrayed by the image of a pregnant woman, though it seems in this version, it's a man and woman laying in bed together, and I doubt I need to give you the birds and the bees talk as to what this implies. As Geshe Namdak continues to explain, quote, "Just as the karmic seed, nourished by craving and grasping, is activated and ready to bring forth a new rebirth which is yet to be manifested, likewise a woman, late in her pregnancy, has a fully developed baby in her womb which has yet to emerge." End quote. In the next link within the outer circle is a segment that represents birth, portrayed by the image of, big shock, a woman giving birth. Quote, "What exists only as a potential in a previous link has now emerged, like a baby born from the womb." End quote. Which leads us finally to the very last section of the 12 links of dependent origination, which is quite simply a depiction of aging and death or decay. In many versions, including this one, it shows a man carrying a corpse wrapped in bandages, which is then revealed on the far right of the illustration to be unwrapped, with the corpse lying on the ground. Quote, "The corpse refers to death carried by an aging person. In between aging and death, there is also sorrow, lamentation, and other types of suffering, such as seeking but not obtaining what one wants, and acquiring what you do not want." End quote. Though it may be slightly misleading to insinuate that death and decay leads back to ignorance, it's not quite as simple as that. Instead, you could see these 12 links as the marks of existence itself that all conditioned phenomena have: world systems, eons, our lives, and even thoughts, birth, dwelling, decay, and extinction, as ultimately within Buddhist belief, death leads to rebirth. Holding this wheel of life is a rather fearsome depiction of a demon-like being known as Yama, the Buddhist lord of death, with its crown of skulls. Quite simply, it symbolizes our impermanent nature, how our bodies, which we often become so attached to and regard as the very definition of me, myself, and I, will always be at the mercy of death. But there is a silver lining hidden in this background imagery though, as portrayed by the Buddha himself on the right, who appears to be pointing to the moon. This is normally a representation of a Buddha pointing out to us an escape route from all this, a path to liberation should one choose to follow it. The reason why I thought it was worth explaining this Thanga art first is because although there is much to take in, and some pretty heavy themes of life and death portrayed in this artwork, it essentially encapsulates everything that is essential to Vajrayana Buddhism, a visual teaching that explores all the core concepts. It shows in a rather profound way how our view of the world is shaped by our very own actions, whether directly or indirectly, and there is no room for the notion of coincidences or things happening merely at random. According to Buddhist teachings, what you get out of life depends entirely on what you put into it, not just for this current lifetime, but over countless eons of past and future lives as well. It's important to emphasize though that it does not encourage a non-existence as a solution to this wheel of life, which is normally a common misinterpretation and slightly nihilistic view of Buddhist philosophy. Instead, this map of the mind teaches that all of these types of suffering, craving, lust, delusion, etc., all have an origination, and that by simply recognizing this system of cause and effect, seeing it as it really is, can ultimately allow you over time to take the reins and see more clearly, instead of life seemingly taking the reins of you and shrouding the world around you in obscurity. In the West, there is often some confusion that arises when Buddhism, a religion that is normally associated with non-theistic beliefs, a religion that focuses on the nature of the mind and generally does not believe in a supreme creator, nevertheless can be found accompanied by many different deities and higher beings. Well, as we've already seen, Buddhism does not necessarily dismiss the existence of gods. However, the important difference is, Buddhists do not believe them to be above the realm of suffering or cyclic existence. They believe instead that only beings that achieve Buddhahood can escape such restrictions. Therefore, it would be a mistake to think that Buddhists do not have a strong sense of spirituality and understanding of the more indescribable nature of our universe. And although such concepts are difficult to explain or visualize, within Tibetan Buddhism, many artists have done their utmost to try and illustrate it, or at least portray it in a way that can aid and inspire practitioners during their meditation or spiritual lessons. But generally, these other beings you'll come across in Thanga art, which depict a being other than the Buddha who lived 2,600 years ago, are not gods or goddesses, despite their radiant and, well, godlike appearances. Most typically, they are either different teachers or famous monks of certain traditions, different Buddhas, or as we'll briefly look into for our next topic, beings known as bodhisattvas. A bodhisattva is a being that basically is a Buddha to be, a being who has reached the threshold of nirvana, but upon doing so, has decided to turn back in order to save all other sentient beings along with them, without exception. Bodhisattvas really do come in all shapes and sizes. One famous one you may already be aware of is that statue of a jolly bald monk with a big pot belly. Many consider this to be an interpretation of the Buddha, but in fact, he's actually a Chinese interpretation of the Bodhisattva Maitreya, the future Buddha, the one who is to come when the Buddhist teachings have vanished completely from this world, and who will restore them when the time is right. There is also Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, who aids Buddhists in gaining insights along their spiritual path, and who holds aloft a sword in his right hand to symbolize the act of cutting through delusion. In addition, there are female bodhisattvas as well, such as Green Tara or White Tara, considered to be the mother of all Buddhas. And sometimes she's considered to be the female emanation of a bodhisattva we'll be taking a close look at, named Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion. Throughout the Buddhist world, Avalokiteshvara has been depicted in many different forms. There is Guan Yin, the Chinese version of a compassionate bodhisattva, typically depicted as a radiant and gentle-faced female, who is also known as Kannon in Japan, and within Mahayana is widely celebrated as the goddess of mercy. But even within Tibetan Buddhism, Avalokiteshvara, known in Tibetan as Chenrezig, seems to appear in different forms. One such emanation you'll come across is the four-armed Chenrezig, such as in this thanga. Much like how he's displayed in many other versions, here he is seated on a lotus and a flat disc of a moon, with another moon disc behind him, as a means to symbolize his spiritual purity. Two of his arms are joined together in prayer in front of his heart, a well-known gesture within Buddhism, and holding what is known as the wish-fulfilling gem, a symbol and phrase used to describe the action of complete and utter selflessness, the striving act to put others before the self. In his other hand, he holds a lotus flower, the symbol of the Dharma, or the Buddhist teachings. In his other right hand, he holds what is known in Buddhism as a mala, a type of rosary that also appears in Hinduism, typically used to count mantras during prayer or meditation. The mantra of Avalokiteshvara is known as Om Mani Padme Hum, that loosely translates to praise to the jewel in the lotus, which again is hugely popular within the Buddhist community, often uttered with the intention to free the mind from suffering and to generate a practitioner's own wholesome compassion. Characteristic to many other bodhisattvas like him, he wears silks and ornaments representing his special qualities, and it's said that the skin of a deer or goa, a type of Tibetan gazelle that can be seen draped over his shoulder, symbolizes his complete freedom from violence. His face is gentle, warm and comforting, a face of true tranquility and acceptance, often likened to that of a loving mother watching over her child. But why is Chenrezig depicted with four arms? Well, there is an interesting quote I came across from Khenpo Katar Rinpoche, who explains the significance as follows. Quote, "The four arms and hands signify the four immeasurables: immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of boundless compassion, is the very embodiment and realization of the four immeasurables. The four immeasurables are the vehicles through which Chenrezig benefits beings, therefore Chenrezig has four arms. The first two, the inner arms, have palms joined at the heart, holding a sky blue wish-fulfilling jewel. This symbolizes that in whatever way Chenrezig manifests to benefit beings, the quality of Chenrezig's mind is never separate from the all-pervasive, non-referential state of Dharmakaya, meaning the primordial wisdom that all human beings possess. In the outer right hand, Chenrezig is holding crystal beads and moving them the way we use a mala to count mantras. This symbolizes that there is not one moment when Chenrezig does not benefit beings. Like the steady movement of counting the beads, Chenrezig is continuously benefiting sentient beings and turning the wheel of enlightened activity. In the outer left hand, Chenrezig holds a lotus flower. This symbolizes that in benefiting sentient beings, Chenrezig manifests in whatever forms are necessary in accordance with the mental capacities, circumstances, and aptitudes of sentient beings. For instance, if Chenrezig appeared in the form of a human among certain kinds of sentient beings, like animals for instance, these animals might run away. For this reason, Chenrezig may appear in the form of an animal. In a similar way, Chenrezig may appear in any of the different realms, such as the Hell realm or the Hungry Ghost realm. However Chenrezig may appear, he remains free from any of the samsaric stains of the various realms. The way a lotus flower growing in a swamp appears free of the stain of the mud, the left hand of Chenrezig, holding the lotus flower, symbolizes that stainlessness." End quote. Aside from the four-armed Chenrezig painting that often appears in Thanga art, there is another profound representation that you'll sometimes come across, known quite literally as the thousand-armed Chenrezig. This time he is standing, rather than sitting, in a pose of readiness and confidence on a moon disk upon a lotus flower, with 11 faces and 1,000 arms. His 11 faces are each in its own colour. 4 faces are red, 3 white, 3 green, and 1 black or dark blue. These 11 faces symbolically represent the complete realization and accomplishment of the 10 stages of a bodhisattva's path to enlightenment. The 3 white faces that can be seen represent what are known as the form bodies of all the Buddhas, and Chenrezig benefits all sentient beings through the essence, blessings, and activities of this form. Similarly, the 3 red faces represent the speech of all Buddhas, whilst the green faces represent the mind of all Buddhas. The 4th red face that can be seen right at the top is that of another Buddha named Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, who we will get into more detail about later in the video. And finally, the wrathful face below Amitabha is a representation of how Chenrezig benefits sentient beings that are very difficult to subdue or tame, a form of compassion that has turned into a sort of righteous anger, showing how Chenrezig finds a way to benefit even the most difficult sentient beings of our world. I know this sounds a little confusing, but again I'll explain this in a little bit more depth as the video goes on. These many heads looking in practically every direction are in conjunction with the 1,000 outstretched arms that Chenrezig has. Quite simply, this is a manifestation of how the compassion of Chenrezig sees, hears, and touches all sentient beings in every direction, leaving no one unnoticed, even in the darkest of times. But from a secular point of view, it is also a representation of how our own core nature is capable of manifesting such compassion. In spite of our anger and our destructive tendencies and our habit of giving in to the senses, Chenrezig shows us how human beings still naturally possess the potential everywhere around the world to practice not only compassion, but equanimity, wisdom, and kindness to such a large and unlimited extent. Whilst on the topic of different forms of compassion, I mentioned that sometimes compassion within Buddhism can take on quite a surprising and unlikely form. A form that again sadly seems to be misinterpreted a lot in the West as being demonic or encouraging black magic, but in truth, they represent enlightened and compassionate guardians that protect and aid confused sentient beings. This may sound overly simplistic, but the best explanation that I've come across goes a little something like this. If you're a parent or guardian of a child, and that child is about to badly misbehave or do something incredibly dangerous, normally you wouldn't approach the child with a loving embrace and a warm smile on your face. Typically in these situations, you would raise your voice and tell them off, not out of malice, but out of love and concern for your child's safety, and to help them learn from their mistakes in future. In a similar sense, human beings come with all different personalities and traits. Sometimes an emanation of a warm and inviting face like Chenrezig is not enough to subdue an unwieldy mind. Sometimes a more direct energy and power is needed in order to transform negative mental factors into wisdom and compassion. For example, one such common wrathful guardian you'll come across in Mahayana Buddhism is that of Mahakala, who often is considered to be the wrathful emanation of Avalokiteshvara. He wears the crown of 5 skulls, which represent the transmutation of the 5 negative afflictions of attachment, aversion, ignorance, pride, and jealousy, into the 5 wisdoms, which are essentially the opposites to these afflictions. Yet it comes to no surprise how at first glance some of these displays do not make a lot of people think of being protected or encouraged to harbour wisdom and compassion when seeing Mahakala seated upon a corpse whilst wielding a flaying knife and a blood-filled skull cup. But again, as surprising as it may seem, these two all symbolise the destruction of obstacles to enlightenment. Resting in the crooks of his elbows in this version, Mahakala is holding what is called a Gandhi gong, considered to be a symbol of his vow to protect the spiritual community. This thanga, according to the Met Museum, is considered to be one of the earliest and grandest of this subject, and can be related to murals preserved in 15th century Tibet. Another well-known example of a wrathful deity in Himalayan Buddhist art is that of Vajrapani, holding his Vajra, which represents the ideal of power and strength in Buddhist mythology. The Vajra, a tool used very frequently in tantric practices, symbolizes the unbreakable nature of the Buddhist teachings and the strength of a human spirit in overcoming adversity. Therefore, it's said that Vajrapani protects the Buddha and his teachings with this powerful weapon. This significantly dark and haunting-looking thanga is a representation of Yamantaka, one of the most elaborate wrathful deities you're likely to come across, and one that I imagine would be quite the sight within a dimly lit Tibetan monastery. Again, as sourced from the Met Museum, Yamantaka is a violent aspect of a Bodhisattva Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom that we briefly looked at earlier, who assumes this form to vanquish and destroy Yama, the Lord of Death, who again we briefly covered when looking at the Wheel of Life thanga. By defeating Yama, the circle of rebirths that prevents enlightenment is essentially broken. Similar to Mahakala, Yamantaka is identified by his dark skin and a vast array of attributes that varies from version to version depending on the artist. In some versions, he is encircled by 5 smaller manifestations, each a Yama conqueror riding a buffalo. Some display him engulfed in bright orange flames, much like the depictions of other wrathful deities. The most characteristic feature at times, depending on the version, would be having the head of a raging bull with sharp tusks, amplifying his fearsome appearance to the enemies of a mind. Such a concept of conquering death, told through the fable of Yamantaka defeating Yama in a colossal battle, may not be entirely unique to Buddhism. However, it's nevertheless considered to be a key step towards a truly enlightened mind. The act of, quote, terminating death is a quality that all Buddhas possess, as they have stopped the cycle of rebirth. Yamantaka then represents the goal of a Buddhist practitioner's journey to enlightenment, or the journey itself. In awakening, one adopts the practice of Yamantaka as the practice of terminating death. There is also a protector deity that, although is not as common, still stands out as a fascinating example that is also, oddly enough, considered to be one of the 75 forms of Mahakala, which is the deity known as Siddhapati. According to the legend, these 2 strange dancing skeletons used to be a pair of hardcore ascetics who became so lost in profound meditation that they failed to notice a thug passing by who cut off their heads. understandably agitated when they eventually realized they took a vow of eternal vengeance and became ferocious enemies of thieves, murderers, and troublemakers. However, any vengeance would have to be exacted from their graveyard residence, as they are forever bound there. As a result, shady types of people were quick to cotton on to this loophole, and so they would steer clear of graveyards, thus resolving the problem of grave robbing. Siddhapati are said to pass the time by dancing and blowing Tibetan longhorns, a ritual interpreted as being symbolic of death and rebirth, and mimicked by masked Tibetan monks twice a year. And as an extra interesting nugget of information, by the way, the Siddhapati had a bird-like dinosaur named in their honour, a relative of a more well-known oviraptor, which was discovered in Mongolia's Gobi Desert by James M. Clark, Mark Norrell, and Rich N. Barsbold in 2001. I've briefly mentioned this already, but within Mahayana Buddhism especially, the historical Buddha of this world I spoke about in the introduction is considered to be only one of millions, billions, or possibly an infinite amount of Buddhas across the universe. After all, what use is Buddhism to Buddhists if they too cannot seek enlightenment for themselves one day? What is pretty interesting about Buddhism is that despite how ancient of a religion it is, it considers not only this world, our planet Earth, but it also considers many popular modern day notions and discussions, such as the existence of parallel universes, life on other planets, and so on, which is in fact a reason why many of the world's greatest scientific minds throughout history have reportedly had a particular soft spot for Buddhism. Although enlightenment is considered to be extremely precious and rare, the ultimate achievement for any sentient being to accomplish, and if we acknowledge that many human beings have come and gone before and after the historical Buddha's death, it is more than possible that many other beings have successfully achieved Buddhahood at some stage. And this is where the many different Buddhas that you'll come across in thangkas come into the equation. This is quite an immense topic to get into, so for the sake of what we're here for, that being the artwork, we'll just take a look at a few of the core examples. One such Buddha that appears in many thangkas is named Amoghasiddhi, who is only one of 5 different wisdom Buddhas within the Vajrayana tradition. Amogha means infallible, and the word Siddh means success. Thus the name of Amoghasiddhi means unfailing success or all-conquering. In Tibet, Amoghasiddhi Buddha is also called by the name Sangye Donyod Trulpa. The word Danyod means meaningful and Trulpa means accomplishment. The notion of being the Buddha of success reflects his mastery over ignorance and his ability to bestow success upon those seeking his blessings. This unwavering determination is symbolized by his Abhaya Mudra, the gesture of fearlessness, performed with his right hand facing outward, palm open. This mudra represents protection from fear and obstacles, ensuring practitioners of Amoghasiddhi's unwavering support on their spiritual path. Amoghasiddhi's association with the color green also carries profound meaning. In Buddhism, green represents harmony, growth, and the flourishing of nature that mirrors the Buddha's ability to transform ignorance into wisdom and cultivate spiritual growth. It also signifies a balance between wisdom and compassion, 2 essential qualities for achieving enlightenment. Amoghasiddhi's attribute, the double dorje, is a powerful symbol of ultimate wisdom, representing the indivisible unity of method and wisdom. The 2 dorjes, intertwined with perfect harmony, signify the inseparable nature of upaya, meaning skillful means, and prajna, meaning wisdom, on the path to liberation. Amoghasiddhi's lotus base is a universal symbol of purity and transcendence in Buddhist art. Like the Rinpoche mentioned earlier, the lotus flower emerges from muddy waters, yet remains unblemished, representing each sentient being's potential to one day rise above the defilements of samsara and attain enlightenment. Amoghasiddhi Buddha's portrayal in thangkas serves as a beacon of hope and transformation, inspiring practitioners to cultivate wisdom and overcome the obstacles that hinder their spiritual progress. His unwavering compassion and unwavering commitment to the liberation of all beings make him a revered figure in Tibetan Buddhism. In addition, there is a very prominent Baizija Guru, or the Medicine Buddha. In the realm of Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism, the Medicine Buddha stands as a beacon of healing, embodying the power to alleviate both physical and mental suffering. He is a serene presence whose symbolic attributes serve as a potential reminder of the interconnectedness of mind and body, emphasizing the holistic approach to well-being that lies at the heart of Buddhist philosophy. He is typically portrayed as a radiant blue figure, his skin the color of lapis lazuli, a precious gemstone revered for its healing properties. This celestial hue symbolizes the Buddha's transcendent wisdom and the purity of his emanations. The Medicine Buddha is seated in the lotus position, a posture of meditation and enlightenment. His hands, poised in a mudra of compassion and healing, hold two emblems of his healing power, one being the lapis lazuli jar of medicinal nectar and the myrobalan plant, known for its restorative properties. But the Medicine Buddha's healing prowess extends far beyond just physical ailments. He is believed to possess the ability to cleanse negative karma, purify the mind of afflictions, and foster spiritual growth. Devotees seek his blessings for both physical and mental healing, recognizing the profound connection between inner harmony and external well-being. The Medicine Buddha Thanga is a particularly vibrant and symbolic artwork, encapsulating the essence of this compassionate healer. The central figure of a Medicine Buddha is often surrounded by a retinue of deities and bodhisattvas, each representing a specific aspect of healing and spiritual transformation. These celestial attendants amplify the Medicine Buddha's healing power and reinforce the interconnectedness of all beings. The Medicine Buddha remains a revered figure in Tibetan Buddhism, his image adorning monasteries, temples, and homes throughout the region. His enduring popularity reflects the deep-seated belief in his healing power and the profound impact he continues to have on the lives of devotees. The Medicine Buddha Thanga, with its rich imagery and exquisite artistry, serves as a tangible embodiment of this compassionate healer's enduring legacy. The red-skinned Buddha we briefly looked at before is Amitabha Buddha, who stands as an embodiment of infinite light, compassion, and the promise of rebirth in his pure land of bliss. As a bodhisattva, he made a long list of vows, 48 to be exact, that all correlate to his desire to create a peaceful realm where enlightenment is guaranteed for all beings. Even if practitioners simply utter his name as little as 10 times, they will be reborn in his land of ultimate bliss after death. This has resulted in Amitabha throughout the ages to be revered by some Buddhists as a central deity, within a sect known as Pure Land Buddhism, a particularly popular form of Buddhism throughout China and Japan, but surprisingly, very few Western scholars have studied it until recent times. In Thanga paintings, the Pure Land is often depicted as a serene landscape, adorned with celestial trees, radiant lotus flowers, and majestic palaces. In the Buddhist scripture, known as the Amitabha Sutra, it even describes the birds there singing songs of the Dharma. This idyllic, wholesome realm symbolizes a pure and perfect environment that supports spiritual growth and liberation from suffering. Sometimes Amitabha Buddha is accompanied by his other emanation, Amitayus, the Buddha of infinite life. Amitayus is typically depicted as a younger figure, symbolizing the youthful energy and vitality that arise from Amitabha's infinite compassion. Amitabha Buddha and Amitayus represent the boundless potential for spiritual growth and the promise of rebirth in the Pure Land. Understandably, due to very little academic research on Amitabha's Pure Land and Pure Land Buddhism in general, this has led to many misinterpretations over the years, such as many people making the assumption that the Pure Land is like a heaven, and that relying on the vows of Amitabha, who is called Amitofo in China and Amida in Japan, is like an act of faith similar to that found in Christianity. But it's not quite as simplistic as that. The Pure Land, or Sukhavati in Sanskrit, is not at all thought of by Buddhists as a heaven, where it's a kind of paradise you can stay in forever and ever. Instead, it's best thought of as kind of a perfect Dharma school, the perfect environment to achieve Buddhahood, so that one may eventually come back someday to liberate all other beings in all other realms afterwards. Just to make it slightly more confusing, although the Pure Land is sometimes referred to as being in the western direction of our world, in the direction of a setting sun, the Pure Land is not exactly in any one place either, at least not in the same sense that if you got on a spaceship you could just travel there that way. It's a place of unimaginable reality, one that cannot be touched by hands or shown to people by saying, "Look, here is the Pure Land." Instead, the Pure Land is something generated in the heart and mind of a devotee. Through contemplation, chanting, and a sense of faith, they can manifest the Pure Land within their own consciousness, and along with the aid of paintings like these, one is provided a visual pathway to enlightenment. And that truly is the beauty of thangka paintings, in that they are not merely used as decorations in temples or used for worship, but also created in effort to help people visualize something so incomparable to anything that could possibly manifest in the material world. Thangka paintings transcend mere aesthetics, serving as sacred objects that are revered and carefully preserved. As I mentioned before, the creation of thangka art is a deeply spiritual process, involving meticulous craftsmanship, unwavering devotion, and of course, a deep understanding of Buddhism. The enduring legacy of thangka art lies in its ability to bridge the gap between the physical and spiritual worlds, offering a glimpse into the profound beauty and wisdom of Buddhism. Its intricate details, symbolic imagery, and vibrant colours captivate the senses, while its underlying spiritual essence inspires and uplifts the mind. Through thangka art, Tibetan culture has preserved and transmitted the essence of Buddhism, ensuring that its timeless message continues to resonate with generations to come. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. Let's face it, we're all pretty tech savvy nowadays, but when it comes to making a website, or at least one that looks slick and professional, it's not always easy to know where to start, and some of us out there certainly don't have the time to learn how to do a bit of cheeky coding. Well, that's where the beauty of Squarespace comes in. From the get-go, you have a huge selection of professional website templates to choose from, with designs for every category that could possibly suit you. Not only that, but they're incredibly easy to customize, and you can update content or add features so your idea, brand, or business stands out just the way you want it to. With Squarespace's Fluid Engine, it's never been easier for anyone to unlock unbreakable creativity. Start with a best-in-class website template and customize every design detail with reimagined drag-and-drop technology for desktop or mobile. And speaking of which, Squarespace makes it a breeze to see how your website is looking on each device as you're building things together, letting you easily switch between desktop and mobile view to help ensure you that your website is looking perfect on every device. And the best part is, Squarespace are offering you a great deal to get started. Just click the link in my description and use a code on screen to get 10% off your first purchase and start your online presence in the best way possible with squarespace.com. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video, and thank you to you for watching. Hope you found this video interesting and informative, and who knows, if you're an artist watching, maybe this gave you a little bit of inspiration for your next painting. And on that note, before I go, it's that time again for Artist Corner, where I get to share some artwork sent in by one of my viewers, and today's featured artist is Anya Khan. The artwork Anya creates is inspired by her heartfelt desire to connect to the world where real-time participation has been minimal. As a person who struggled with an undiagnosed illness that left her on the brink of death for 2 decades, creativity has been her lifeline. This unforeseen saving grace provided a vessel to channel numerous ways to engage with her unfolding story. What is more, it has become a direct connection to the people's stories in the vast world of beauty and complicated life challenges. For years, her work was based on survival. Now entering another phase of her life, her work has transitioned into a narrative and personal evolution, and highlights how grateful she is to still be alive. The work is rooted in symbolism and touches on subjects such as vulnerability, loss, challenges, beauty, wisdom, and the voice we all have inside. Anya is a multifaceted entrepreneur, globally awarded artist, photographer, published author, curator, and inspirational speaker. Anya's artistic journey started as a therapeutic response to a challenging upbringing and her enduring battle with chronic illnesses such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, mast cell activation syndrome, dysautonomia, and POTS. Art became a way to express herself and a survival mechanism rather than an initial career pursuit. Her artwork and photography weave together human and animal subjects, blending symbolism, nature, anatomy, and the profound themes of mortality and rebirth. Her chosen mediums include watercolor, colored pencil, ink, gouache, collage, and a Nikon camera. Her work has been in over 300 exhibitions in over 10 countries at institutes such as San Diego Art Institute, St. Louis Art Museum, the Contemporary Art Museum of St. Louis, and the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art. She has lectured at colleges and universities and has been featured in Yahoo, Prevention Magazine, Authority Magazine, and Entrepreneur on Fire. Khan's influence extends beyond her work. She's honored to have served as both a gallerist and curator for internationally recognized books and projects. She's also the owner of Rise Visible, a web design and digital marketing agency, as well as the founder of Create for Healing. As amazing as her career is, in terms of her work, I think it is absolutely beautiful. Each figure feels like a vibrant and powerful portrait of each chapter in her journey that seems to twist and turn between colourful and hopeful to dark and foreboding, a real testament to her courage and what she's had to endure. She has a very impressive collection of work up online, and of course I urge you all to check out more when you get the chance. Please look up these links on screen or click on them in the below description. As always, I'd love to hear from you too if you're an artist watching and you want to get involved in my channel. Please send your art and a bit about yourself to blinddweller@gmail.com, or I'm sometimes floating around on Instagram if you want to reach me on there. Don't forget to join my art club on Discord as well if you want to share your art on there and meet other artists. And as always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members. Here's a special shout out to all of my top tier donators: Vlad Siv, Tyler Butler, Harley Raven, Eric Lamarca, Dave MC, Molitail, Equatamok, Lee Flowers, Calvin Kai, The New Ongoing 24, Akaiza, Large Fatty or Big Chad, Charlie Sancheezy, Paul Perea, Ken B, and Carol H. That's all for me today then, everyone. See you in the next one soon. Keep being creative, and bye for now.